Welcome to the Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Steve Davenport and Clem Miller. Every 2 weeks, Steve and Clem bring you brief investment insights you may not find anywhere else. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Here are Steve and Clem.
Hello and welcome everybody to Skeptic's Guide to Investing. This is Clem Miller. I've got Steve Davenport here, and today we're going to talk about the so-called one big beautiful bill, or as some people say, the big ugly bill, or the big bloated bill, or whatever you want to call it. Steve, personally, when I look at this thing, I see a bill that's so big, so complex, 900 something pages, that I don't think it's really possible to get your arms around the whole thing. So can you share with me what, sort of the top, 3 or 4 things that you get out of this bill that you think our listeners should understand?
Sure. I think that when Trump was trying to get elected, he realized he made a mistake in giving the corporations a tax cut that was permanent. And he didn't give a permanent tax cut to individuals. But he needs individuals to help his administration continue. So this time, he put the big, beautiful bill in front of everyone, and he said, I'm going to make sure these tax cuts that I put in place prior and expire at the end of this year will be made permanent. And so when you think of that for the individual, first of all, let's talk about BBB, or the big, beautiful bill. I don't know of any president who's tried harder to be a showman and to show people how much he cares and he wants and he does things for the people. Now, I think the question is, what people? And I think when you look at the big, beautiful bill, he did deliver on a lot of his promises. And so my question is, okay, he delivered on those promises because he's a man of integrity and he doesn't want to say something that's not true, or he's concerned about midterm elections and he knows if he doesn't address these things, he will be looked at as a fraud, and some of those people who voted for him just so that their tax rates stayed the same will be very, very disappointed if they have overtime pay, or if they have other areas where they're going to benefit. I find that the big, beautiful bill has done a lot for a lot of people. The question is, are those people really in need of some of those aspects of not having the tax rates go up? I think that it was irresponsible of him originally to just do business and not do the individual in a permanent way. If you were going to make a choice, I would have rather he choose people in 2016 and not companies. So now he's gotten this bill through, and this bill will have a major impact in that we will avoid a recession probably, because if the tax rates did revert to normal, or where they were in 2016, that would have been an economic drag unlike any we've seen for a while. So yes, he's done something here that is going to help people not see their tax rates. What has he done in the major states with the SALT? He basically said that state and local taxes, that he put a limit of 10,000 for people to deduct, was really hurting New York, California, and other high tax states. And now he's decided, all those high tax states, I don't dislike them as much. I'm going to make the limit go to 40,000 from 10,000. So if I was a middle class American in the middle of the country, I would say he just gave a lot to those people with a lot of money. And I thought that he was trying to discipline those states and get them to change, and now he's given up. and he's letting the people who have higher deductibles, continue to have a benefit from the federal government. So I think that some of this is really just a payback to different people in different situations. Should I be surprised that paybacks in government and bills that favor one group over another? I think, Clem, a long time ago, I have this idealistic thoughts about how government should operate, whether it's Voltaire or whether it's any of the great writers talk about democracy, Socrates and Aristotle. And I think of those ideas when I think of democracy. And I'm not really living in the present, which is we have a very disjointed democracy with two choices, and neither choice is really looking very good right now. So I think the big, beautiful bill, in summary, does rectify and stabilize our tax situation. So we'll know what our rates are going forward, which will make it easier. The fact that we increase the limits for estate planning, the fact that we did some things with SALT, the fact that we did some things with overtime pay, I think all of those things will help Trump. And all of those things will help some of America. But in the end, the people who will benefit most are the top 10 and 20%. They'll see a benefit somewhere between 6,000 and 20,000. And I think in the bottom, we'll see a detraction of something like 5 to 6,000 in the bottom 20% of the population. So is it equal to everyone? No. Are any bills usually equal to everyone? Probably not. Should I give up on this concept of equality and treatment under the law and under the way that we're governed? I think I might have to. But bottom line, it's a big bill. I don't know if I can use the word beautiful, because I think that what I find most disturbing about this bill, well, I'll get into the problems with it. Those are the good things about the bill. I think that, we could talk about some negatives and talk about the timing, but let's stop there and see if you have any comments on what I said.
Well, you focus right now on the benefits to individuals from the bill, and I would like to hear your thoughts about the consequences. But but even more so, I want to know from you, Steve, what you think about the macroeconomic and investment implications of this bill. I mean, after all, we are going to be seeing higher deficits, probably an acceleration of the high deficits we already have. We're going to see higher debt levels. Do you think that all of that is going to impact borrowing costs and just make our fiscal situation even more untenable in the future? Or do you think some of these benefits that you just laid out to individuals create incentives for growth that will help, provide the revenues in order to, help pay for these higher deficits and debt?
I think this is where the big, beautiful bill gets ugly. And why I think that is that the way they have structured this bill is the benefits accrue in the first 3 years, and in the next 7 years, all of the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare come through. And so when we look at the purpose of legislation, it is to improve the economy and improve the overall livelihood of U.S. citizens. And I think that when I look at this bill, it improves and provides stimulus to lower income individuals through not taxing tips and overtime. And that's going to be good for stimulus for the next 2 years. Now, why would they want to do something for the next 2 years and not do it for all 10 years? One, if they did it for 10 years, it would be more expensive and it would have been harder to get passed. The bill is already going to cost, based on estimates, somewhere around $3.5 trillion. That's trillion with a T. And so they front loaded it so that the midterm elections, which start, basically the campaigning will start in January of 26, the elections in November of 26. And guess when the Medicare cuts start to go in effect? January of 27.
Yeah.
So they are playing a political game here with all of those voters who they hope will say, oh, he got rid of my, overtime tax. I'm really happy about that. And it will be that way for the first 2 or 3 years, but then it will go away. And so why is he front loading it? Why are the Medicare cuts not happening right away? Because he doesn't want any blowback from any of the negatives of this bill. I look at that and I think it's politics as usual, and he's trying to satisfy groups that he thinks will be key for Republicans to win in the midterm elections. Is that a strictly political, endeavor? Is there other reasons why he couldn't have done it differently? Absolutely. It's all about politics, and it's all about getting reelected, and it's not about the national debt. It's not about the people. It's not about trying to make lives better. It's about getting reelected. As, James Carville once said, it's the economy, stupid. And he wants this economy to run on a stimulated sense for the next 2 years. Why is he pushing Powell so hard to lower rates? Because he knows that the housing problems and the higher rates are causing a slowdown in real estate, which if we lowered rates 1.5%, 2%, we would see a rebound also in the housing areas, and that would create even more inflation. So the bill is going to be inflationary. The inflation is going to further give us problems. And I think the one thing that he's trying to change, which is Powell's and rates, still might not change. It might not change at all. And if it doesn't, and we start to get more and more debt added on to these auctions, we're going to see higher rates. And if we see higher rates, his goal all along was, I'm going to provide stimulus and strength, and I'm also going to get help from the Fed, and that help from the Fed is going to guarantee my reelection. I think what he hasn't really thought about is the bond vigilantes and some of the people out there who say our debt is enough. We're at 30 trillion now. We're going to add 3 more. I think it's really unrealistic to think that you can have a blank check and just do something and there won't be any byproduct or any ramifications. There are people who are going to pay, and those people are going to be the homeowners who want to buy a house and the people who have to pay higher interest on car loans and everything, credit cards. So when we look at this, we could say, well, that's all Powell's fault. But I think he's missing the point, which is inflation is inflation is inflation. Whether it's caused by breakdowns in supply lines during COVID, whether it's caused by the Fed increasing rates to try to address the inflation, and therefore the rates have to stay high and somewhat stagnate the economy so that we start to see inflation weaken and decline. We've seen inflation come down, but it's still not where it needs to be. And guess what? When you do things that is stimulatory to the economy, they are going to cause more inflation. So tariffs are going to cause more inflation whenever they get implemented. And so now I think he's realizing some of this tariff talk could be what prevents him from getting that cut from Powell. And so he has to decide, do I want to continue down this path of tariffs? And do I want to continue to do this and risk a rate cut before the midterm elections? If he does, it could backfire in that some of those same people are trying to become homeowners who are working overtime and getting tips. And so if they can't become homeowners because rates stay high, they're going to feel that impact. They're going to be on the lower side of the credit spectrum. They're going to be the ones paying the highest rates. And therefore, I think he's missing how all these things are related. I think he wants to have a talking point. He's got talking points now with tips and overtime. I think he's going to have talking points. I don't know what the SALT increases is really going to, is he going to win New York? Is he going to win California because he increased the SALT deduction? No way. That's not going to happen. So what did he do it for? He did it for some of those Republicans who think they can take more seats in those states. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case because the truly large donors have probably already moved out of the state and moved to Florida or Texas. So I'm not sure he's going to get what he wants from that SALT increase. But again, it comes down to the Fed, interest rates, and the overall economic environment. I don't think we've seen what is going to happen yet with these tariffs. So I don't think we can say how inflationary or non-inflationary they're going to be. But let's just say if they start to be more inflationary than they estimated, the rates are going to go higher and there's going to be no way we get a cut. And when that happens, that squeeze on the economy, I'm not sure that the tips and overtime tax breaks are going to be enough for him to sail through the midterms. I still believe we're a divided country and we're narrowly divided. And I'm not sure there's a lot of goodwill when I look at the immigration actions and I look at some of the other actions of this administration. So my thing would be the bond vigilantes are going to sniff out that inflation. And when they do, I think they're going to start to react. And I don't think it's going to be good for treasuries, which means higher rates and higher rates for everyone who wants to be a homeowner. And I think we've already seen the average age for homeownership go up in the last 5 years. And I think it will continue to go up and it will continue to be a narrow group of people versus a wider group who've enjoyed the American dream of owning their own home. So I think that the ownership of this bill will be interesting as we start to see reactions. But I think he made a mistake going after tariffs too early.
Yeah. So Steve, sort of two things that come to my mind as you were talking there. One is that, with regard to rates, the Fed has control over short-term rates, doesn't have control over long-term rates. So it's not guaranteed by any means that, by Trump putting in another Federal Reserve chair or a shadow one, that he'll be able to get longer term rates down. There's no guarantee because the Federal Reserve does not control long rates. It only controls short rates, and long rates reflect inflation expectations. And so if inflation expectations go up, as you were suggesting they might, we might actually see higher long-term rates and thus higher borrowing costs for the government, for homeowners, for car loans. We may well see all that.
I'm just going on the assumption that we stay pretty flat.
Yeah.
If we saw a steepening as well, then yes, it's going to be very harmful. And the stiffening really up for, if you take this 5-year notes as a proxy for mortgages, I think the 5 and 10 years could go higher without anything happening with Powell and the short-term rates.
So then, Steve, the other thing I wanted to mention, apart from the rates, is that, you had this group of fiscal hawks in the House of Representatives who, for the longest time, did not want to go along with this one big, beautiful, whatever bill, right? And the reason they were able to be convinced at the last minute is apparently Trump had a meeting with them and said, hey, don't worry about this. We'll make additional cuts in the future within the White House. In other words, after the bill is passed. And so, the question, that goes to the whole legal question that, is, not fully resolved as to whether the White House can actually do rescissions on spending. Now, it was partially resolved because the Supreme Court ruled that, overturned this temporary restraining order of a judge who said that they couldn't go forward with spending cuts and reorganizations and whatnot. But left the entire implementation of the litigation to the lower court judges. So they didn't say, I mean, contrary to what Trump and his people might say, they didn't say, oh, you can do whatever you want to government agencies to cut spending. They said that lower courts can look at that on a case-by-case basis and honor the litigation. But still, Trump may have told his House fiscal conservatives that don't worry about it. We're going to do more Doge type cuts in the future, and thus reducing expenditure. So I think that's something we might see in the future is more of these Doge style cuts.
We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying our episodes. If you are, then we'd greatly appreciate your liking, following, and sharing. Help us help others. Now let's get back to the discussion.
I believe you're right, Clem. There's a lot of room between here and when these things start to take effect, and what could be the economic issues and what could be the result of this. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm just giving you my opinion. And these are not, these are not clear to everyone, and they're certainly not clear to me. I'm just trying to give you my best judgment. The one thing I'd say about this bill that showed me it was politics as usual was Murkowski in Alaska was against the bill, but then when some additional items were added for forestry and fire protection and some other things that benefited just Alaska, she suddenly went from a no to a yay. And I thought at a bill this large, there's no way they're going to throw in, items just for one senator. But they threw in whatever they had to get it through. Both bills passing by one vote. I think it, well, actually in the Congress, it was more than one vote, but it was a narrow victory. A victory is still the same, but narrow. And I think that what that tells you is we're a narrowly divided country, and it's not going to be easy for these things to last, especially if he loses the midterm election. So again, I know I may sound like a broken record about midterms, but if you want to make sure that Trump doesn't have success in his last 2 years, the Democrats are going to try, and independents are going to try to make sure that that he isn't able to pass further legislation in the last 2 years. I think that the Republicans in the House were naive to think that this big, beautiful bill was not going to be. I think the Republican Party has walked away from the fiscally prudent mantra that they've tried to hold, even though they really tried to hold that, mostly benefiting the rich. So I think that it's going to be hard to determine how this all impacts. I think it will come down to personalities in some of these individual elections. I look at Tom Tillis here in North Carolina and the fact that he couldn't do it, so he just resigned. And that way he took away Trump's threat of, I'm going to primary you, I'm going to go after you. And again, is threats in politics the way we should operate? No. But we are where we are. We are we are being led by a person who believes in personal threats on social media. And that's just the way he operates. And so therefore, I think it's great that he got this bill done in terms of his own agenda, but I'm not sure his agenda is the agenda of all of the American people. Am I glad that my taxes aren't going to go up? Somewhat, but I'm somewhat disappointed that it's going to come at the, at the loss for those people on Medicare and those people who will have to find work in order to satisfy and qualify for their coverage. It's sad. I don't think it really needed to come to that. I think they could have probably passed a bill that was a little more balanced. And I like the fact that when he was doing this, he was considering if they want to do a millionaire's tax, we'll consider it. I think there were ways to do this bill in a more reasonable structure. And I still think that the two major items are when and if the Fed will lower, and two, when and if at some of these auctions we see higher rates and bond vigilantes not willing to see lower rates, because higher rates, as we saw, can quickly turn around an economy and make it difficult for everyone. So let's watch the rates, let's watch the bonds, and I don't know, Clem, what do you think is the most important item in this bill?
What do I think is the most important? I think the Medicaid cuts are a very significant issue politically and also economically, because it's really the first cut at trying to eat into the so-called entitlements, and might pave the way for cuts to Social Security and cuts to bigger cuts to Medicare. But I think the Medicaid issue is very significant. I think that it has a political dimension in that there are a lot of people on Medicaid in red states. And so I think as soon as a lot of people in red states start seeing their Medicaid requirements being shifted around, I think there might be some opposition to that growing, and could impact the midterms, as you were pointing out. But Steve, I wanted to ask you one last question. Since you mentioned that you thought rate yields might go up in the future, rates might go up. Is this a time to hold bonds?
I think everyone who holds bonds is going to worry about higher rates. And I've tried to mitigate some of what I think is government risk by looking more at corporates and looking at like an LQD, which is a corporate bond ETF, versus an AGG, which is all bonds, including treasuries. And I think that corporations are in better shape than the US government after this, because I think the US government, although it can print, that printing will cause inflation, and that inflation will hurt everyone. So I believe that to try to mitigate some of the risk associated with treasuries and issuing more, the way to avoid that is to go shorter, and also to go in other spaces like municipalities. I think some municipalities and munis are going to do well, because I think the taxes, I believe, are still a major consideration. And I think that states like Massachusetts that have added a millionaire's tax, I think we might see more states like that, because the SALT and some of those things is not going to be enough to help their fiscal situations in California and New York. So I believe that we'll see in the next 5 years more millionaire's tax to help with this. And I think that what that does is ultimately makes people feel less confident in the bonds of the United States. I think the $5 trillion addition to our debt ceiling is quite a move, and it does give us some time in terms of how do we adjust to that and how do we do it better. I think Trump's dream of all the tariffs paying for a lot of this are not likely to come true. And I think it will be absorbed by the consumer and it will be absorbed by the importer to a degree, and some of it will come to the U.S. But I think that it usually leads to higher prices. Those higher prices will eventually filter through the consumers and lead to more inflation. More inflation is my message for today. I think that more inflation is likely. Therefore, look at your duration of the bonds in your portfolio and try to make sure you're comfortable. If rates were to go up by 2% and your duration is 5 years, then you're going to see a 10% decline in your bonds. That's reality. If you can live with 10% less in your bonds, if it's paying you 3-4%, that kind of makes it, eat up 2 years worth of coupons, 3 years worth of coupons. I don't think that's really the best place. I'd probably say that you should shorten and think about more corporates. Shorten duration, include more corporates. And as always, I like munis because I think that, some of that tax benefit is hard to get in other ways. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It sure did. So appreciate it, Steve. So I think we'll wrap up there. We really appreciate everybody joining us today. And if you have any thoughts about this particular podcast or about the podcast in general, or moving onto video, should Steve change his shirt color, or should I cut my hair, or
Let's both smile for the camera as I go off. All right, ready?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
The views shared on this podcast represent the personal investment views of the hosts. They are for educational purposes and not meant to be taken as investment advice. Listeners should consult their own investment, legal, and tax advisors. Past performance of any investments is not a guarantee for future return.